Good evening, everyone, and everyone at home, too. When this great nation of ours was founded 210 years ago, every single citizen was given a constitutional right to bear arms. They were the militia. Today, now, there's some folks who would take away that right, all right? Let them and the murderers and the rapists and the robbers win this victory, and we're all victims. Gun control, next. At home base with us tonight, friends, we've got Josh Sugarman. Josh, how are you?
Okay.
Good. National Coalition to Ban Handguns.
Right.
Gee, a guy who looks like you, I would think, would like guns. Stephen Dandrilli. Stephen Dandrilli is with us. He's the Guardian Group International, former New York City Police Department, Manhattan South Task Force, specializing in VIP security, right?
That's right.
All right. For both you guys. For both of you gentlemen tonight, let me ask a question. Doesn't the Constitution allow everyone to bear arms? Let me start with you.
Well, a lot of people think so, but no, that's not the case. You mentioned it's militia. You're right. But we've been 5 Supreme Court cases. Each time they found that there's no right to keep and bear arms as far as individual. And we've banned handguns about 5 communities now, including D.C., including Chicago, Illinois. And you and I can dicker
Chicago,
about...
Illinois does not ban handguns, all right? Get your information straight. If you did not have a permit, before 1984, you cannot now apply for one. But if you had one before 84, you can carry a handgun.
You tried to buy a handgun in Chicago recently?
Yeah, I know Chicago.
I may say, one of my clients, and of course I wouldn't mention the name, all of our clients are confidential, but one of our clients who has a business in New York City, lives in Chicago, also owns a place and a business in Miami, has a carry gun permit in Chicago, and hired us to get one for him in Manhattan and in Miami. And,
what about the Constitution? Does it give us the right to bear arms?
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind that any law-abiding citizen of this country, this great country of ours, assuming, of course, that he's willing or she's willing to undertake training and submit to a fingerprint check, has the right to bear arms.
Is that also in the Constitution, the fingerprint check and the training?
No, the Constitution is elastic. We interpret it in a rational manner. To do otherwise would place us in a cave of chaos. Are you going to tell a person here that works hard for a living, a person that is law-abiding, a person that is willing to take the proper training, that he or she cannot protect himself with a firearm? I think that's wrong.
No, what we're saying, people, of course, protect themselves, but to say a firearm, I mean a handgun, not long guns, rifle, shotgun, is useless as self-defense.
A rifle or a shotgun...
A handgun is useless as self-defense?
If you look at the stats, sure. Every year, we lose about 20,000 Americans to handgun violence. 12,000 suicides, 9,000 murders, 1,000 fatal accidents. Do you want to guess the number of dead criminals every year?
How many dead criminals?
You don't want to guess?
No, you go ahead and tell me. You know all the answers.
About 200.
Huh?
About 200.
About 200. Now let me give you a figure. 650,000 violent crimes are thwarted every year by people who are licensed to carry handguns. Want to beat that one, pal?
Easily. No, actually, that's a pretty easy...
The statistic for that is the United States Department of Justice, actually. It's not
the U.S. Department of Justice.
It's an official federal
Actually, that's
study.
not true. Actually, that's a U.S. Department of Justice figure.
Well, if you took the time to do some research and be less rude, you'd find out that the Justice Department says...
He's entitled to his opinion. He's quoted nothing but lying facts so far. But when he gets Justice Department facts, he doesn't like those. Because Mr. Meese gave them to us, huh? Don't you try and change my rudeness. My mother couldn't. Mr.
Are you done?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the Justice Department recently concluded a number of important decisions and gave us some information that we can hang our hats on, so to speak. Regardless of your position on are you for guns or against guns, we're not neither. We're for pro-choice. And it's a rational decision. Again, why shouldn't we have the same means of self-defense as do the police, as do any logical law enforcement or security agency?
Well, I think the police should, all right, automatically,
Absolutely.
all right? But here's what I think. I think we have tied the hands of the police in this country. Our super-liberal Supreme Court under Mr. Warren tied the hands of the police so effectively that these guys can't do their job anymore.
I agree. I believe that the good citizens of this country should work together with law enforcement and form a team effort against the criminal, because the criminal will always get an illegal gun. You're not going to take guns away from Americans. Americans have something like 500 million guns, and we're not going to take them away.
You're only off by a factor of 5, but ignoring that. First off, we're not talking about taking away all guns.
Go ahead.
They won't call the Justice Department.
No, let the man finish. Let the man finish. Josh, I don't want to gang up on you. I want you to give your facts and figures and let them become the jury. Go ahead.
It's really swell of you.
Is it swell of me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We actually look at Justice Department figures, and the figures you are all quoting, I don't know where they've come from the Justice Department.
Well, in a well-publicized campaign that received law enforcement support, let's take Orlando, Florida. Something like 6,000 women were trained officially by the police department, and within a 2-year period, the rape rate was reduced 90%. Now, how can you argue with that? What is wrong with allowing a law-abiding, trained, responsible citizen the right to protect themselves with a firearm?
Because it's the law-abiding, responsible...
Wait a minute. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead. Let Josh answer. Let Josh answer. You started to say it's the law-abiding citizen.
It's the law-abiding citizen, basically citizens who are doing the killing. The idea of the Ozzie and Harriet Nelson handgun...
Well, then if they're law-abiding, they're doing the killing in self-defense, aren't they?
No.
And any scum who comes into my house while my daughter and my wife are there, I'd blow their brains out.
It's very interesting, but let me just say this thing.
Wait a second.
I'd like to answer the question I started.
Fine. Go right
There's a
ahead.
myth that you're helping to perpetuate that all the handgun violence there is basically drug deals going awry, evil people killing other evil people. Most handgun violence is good people, or in some cases stupid people, who buy handguns for self-defense, get too drunk, too angry, too depressed, turn the handgun against themselves.
Well, now
friend
you
or family, or
contradicted
fatal
yourself.
accident.
You said law-abiding.
No, I haven't.
If they do that, they're not law-abiding, are they?
Law-abiding up until that point.
Oh, I see, up until that point. Are you law-abiding? You talk about the 20,000 people, citizens who are killed by handguns. Is it law-abiding the 55,000 people who are killed in motor vehicle accidents every year? Should we ban the motorcycle, and should we ban the car? Would you like to do that?
No,
I think we should. I think we should take the emphasis off of the gun, which is an object like this.
Well,
a gun will not move.
Handgun,
it depends on who touches the gun and why. The gun is an object. It's a tool. If it's a good purpose for using that tool, if it's a trained individual, like a law enforcement officer, or a licensed, trained civilian, that gun could be a very, very important object. And if you don't have it, you don't have the option. And if you don't have the option and you're a young lady or let's say a widowed woman or a mother with children in the home and your husband is out and somebody breaks in with the idea of doing physical harm, you have no option. You're going to dial 911 and wait? No. I think you have the right to defend yourself, and I think that's very clear with all of the statutes, except for those states and those localities that are making it impossible, not for anyone else, but the honest citizen.
You know, it's weird when you stop to think of it for just a second, Steve. 37 or 38 states guarantee the right to handguns.
Absolutely.
And then they have handgun bans.
And in those
various
states,
cities.
you find, and again, these are not my statistics or statistics from any biased organization or any university that swings either left or right. These are United States Justice Department statistics, FBI uniform crime statistics. You find in the states where you have less restrictive licensing, you have less crime. There is a definite correlation between civilian ownership of guns and the crime rate.
Yeah, it equates into death and murder. Let's look at that.
Equates into death and murder. We'll come back in just a second. We'll come back. Shush. Handguns, my friends. Are we killing ourselves instead of the criminals? We'll examine this in the next segment.
Guests for the Morton Downey Jr. show stay at the Meadowlands Hilton.
Unfortunately, we have lost one of our great wimpish liberal guests. And the newspapers will write that I kicked him off the show, but he didn't have the guts to stay on the show. He left, and our audience saw it. The audience saw it. Now, I was going to ask Mr. Sugarman some questions, all right, but obviously he does not have the strength of his convictions. Let me ask you then. What do you think the prime motivation is behind people's desire to own a handgun?
Self-defense. I think it's a natural instinct.
That's from the legal citizen, the law-abiding citizen.
Absolutely. Whenever I speak about the right to bear arms, I'm always included in that. You have to imply that I mean law-abiding. Honest citizen, a citizen that has common sense, a citizen... Forget citizen. There are a lot of very good aliens that come to this country that become citizens in due time. They work very hard. I don't think we should exclude them also. People that come here as legal residents.
Oh, yeah.
And they work hard, like all of us, and we have to be able to protect our property as well as our life and our families and children and people that we love. I think it would be ridiculous to think otherwise, and as far as I know, coming from law enforcement, I don't know any of the guys that I worked with or any of the women that came on the force later on that felt that honest citizens should not have guns under certain controlled circumstances.
All right, just the same as when you go to get a driver's license for a car, all right?
Right.
You've got to know how to drive a car.
Absolutely.
Well, let me go. We've got a special guest in the studio. I'd like to welcome him and thank him for being with us. And he's opposite from my point of view for the most part, but he's a respected gentleman who's going to give us some exact figures, all right? Congressman Torricelli. Congressman, good evening to you, sir. How are you? Congressman, I know, or at least I believe, that you are in favor of gun control.
I'm in favor of the regulation of guns.
All right.
Largely, the discussion so far has been on the prohibition of people having any right to have handguns.
Right.
There's no such legislation. I don't know of any such proposal. The question is how you regulate them and who gets access to them.
Okay. How would you regulate them and who would get access to them?
The most important element of the debate is whether or not there should be a waiting period. In New Jersey, we've got a waiting period.
How long?
Most states do not. I think the practical, by the time you go through your local police department and they check your police records, the real answer is it'll take you over a month to get a gun.
Does it take that long? Is the bureaucracy so thick that it takes that long to check the records? I mean, let's face it, if you've got a criminal in the lockup and you're taking his fingerprints, you're sending them down quick for a check, you're putting them out across the wires, you can check that guy and find out if you can hold him within 24 hours.
It shouldn't take that long, and the proposals for a national waiting period are 7 or 14 days. We want to check mental health records, we want to check police records, we want to check with the local police department. We think we can get it down to 7 to 14 days if we had a national waiting period. I think that's reasonable.
What do you think about a national waiting period?
I think that it might be good, but then again, knowing the way bureaucracies work and knowing that perhaps the motive might not be to create a good thing by checking people out, but because some law enforcement agencies, not all, but enough, would be vehemently anti-civilian ownership of guns, and therefore being charged with the responsibility and giving the absolute discretion to decide whether you can get one or not.
But let me interrupt you a second. I think what the congressman is saying is that there would be certain guidelines, all right, with the law enforcement agencies.
There are a lot of guidelines
for instance,
now.
But if there was a guideline that with the FBI, for instance, that a guy had to be wanted for a felony or had to have committed a felony that he was insane.
In the state form, that's exactly how the law reads. You've committed a felony. You've been involved in an armed robbery. You're not getting a gun, period. That's reasonable. You've been in a psychiatric hospital. You're not getting a gun. The fact is, in this country today, people are walking out of psychiatric hospitals and getting their hands on guns and committing crimes.
They're not getting licensed.
Well, let me
guns.
ask you a question.
They're getting guns where licenses aren't required, where there's no waiting period.
Not in New York
John
City.
Hinckley walked into a gun store in Texas. He lied about his address. There was no check. There was no waiting period, and he went out and he shot Ronald Reagan.
Could he
National waiting period wouldn't have happened.
Good. Congressman, with the law as many people are proposing it, and I think basically as you are proposing it, would you have caught a John Hinckley?
Absolutely. National waiting period. They would have checked with his local police, found he lied about his address, would have had his history of mental illness, never would have gotten a gun.
But would they have had his history of mental illness? Because they didn't even get that until after he had been captured for 5 or 6 days.
In the first instance, Morton, they wouldn't even have to get to it because he lied on his application about his address because he didn't want his local police to know.
Okay, but he would have known
As soon as you
not
lied
to
on your
lie about
application, no gun. John Hinckley never would have gotten a gun.
All right.
That's all we're asking for, and it's reasonable.
Let me introduce another guest here, all right? Head of the Guardian Angels, founder of the Guardian Angels, friend of ours and a friend of a lot of people in this part of the country, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, good evening. Now, Curtis, I know that you and your people don't carry weapons, all right?
Yes.
When you're in the subways. But aren't there occasions when you can think that private citizens who ride those subways, who don't see a guardian angel, could really want to have a gun on them?
Well, Morton, I'm very, very torn on this subject. I've laid to rest 3 guardian angels who've been shot and killed in the line of duty. In the many of the 60 cities that we run patrols, 3 that I've had to personally bury. 9mm Browning, Colt 45, 357 Magnum. You know the size of the hole it put through them. You could
Those
have drove a
weren't
truck
Saturday
through.
night specials either, were they, pal?
Not at all.
Yeah.
You know we don't carry weapons. And we've heard of Gandhi and King and nonviolent passive resistance. But the problem is that when you identify with the average man and the average woman, and you look to the congressman and what he represents, government, they're supposed to be taking care of us. This is America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. We can't even walk in our streets. What do we, the Guardian Angels, say? We patrol in groups. We train in the martial arts. Do we look at someone who's been victimized, raped, brutalized, savaged over and say, no, 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 you can't have a gun. That store owner right now in Brooklyn or Newark or Detroit or Chicago, 16 hours a day for some Herkimer jerks, vultures and buzzards to come in and clean out his register, he decides he's got to have the gun. Can I condemn that man? Not in any way, shape, or form.
Pretty tough.
But do we just give guns out like we're giving out condoms now? You know, there are a lot of people... Mort, as you know, you've had quite a few guests. There are a lot of people out there, all the furniture upstairs, but rearranged in the wrong rooms. All I'm saying is it ought to be an option of the wardrobe of options in defending yourself and fighting back. You mentioned cars. You can't just go out and start driving a car. You got to prove to the state that you can drive the car, take a test. To the NRA, who sometimes gets a little bit too zealous, why not let everybody who wants a gun take a test, go to a school, learn how to fire the bloody thing, take it apart, put it away so the kids don't get it and end up playing Russian roulette. That's all we're saying. And in one last case, remember Bernard Goetz. And that pretty much brought
And
the
as a
attention.
matter of fact, when we come back, we're going to meet a man, all right, who had a gun, and a hell of a lot of bad it did for him. Next, stay tuned. I want to show you a tape now of someone who needs no introduction, all right, in defending on the point of whether you should have a gun. He's either a genuine American hero or someone the departed late Mr. Sugarman or maybe even Colonel Pagano would like to put behind bars, all right? Mr. Bernard Goetz. Would you watch this?
Just for example, if people were on the subway system then, what if the whole system geared up and went to work against this lawlessness, this atrocity? What if someone else in that subway system were butchered? And the guys, you think the guys would have been caught? You think it would have been any big thing? It would have been one more statistic, and don't nod your head yes, because you know better. And if you don't know better, you just don't know New York.
There we go. Bernard Goetz. Now, of course, we're going to, that, of course, is part of Goetz's confession, as most of you know. We're going to introduce you to a gentleman that I am delighted to have with us tonight, a gentleman who left a Christmas party for his state troopers to be here. My good friends from the NRA said that this was too rough a crowd for them to appear in front of. Tough stuff, all right? I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Clinton Pagano, as the superintendent of the New Jersey State Police. First to Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, there's no more familiar horror story show occurring daily on our subways than the one you saw on Goetz. Do you think Goetz was a hero or a criminal?
He was neither. If you were to listen to a little bit more of that 2-hour graphic, horrific discussion of what he did on that train, you'd know that he was like the average man down there in the bowels of New York City in the slime and grime, being subjected to a horde of cretins who were going to make you believe that they were asking him for $5. Now, Mort, you heard me tell you, we don't carry weapons. But there was only one thing that Bernard Goetz didn't do that day. His aim wasn't good enough in the case of one gentleman, James Ramseur, because we found out 3 months later he took an 8-month pregnant black woman that he had grown up with in a public housing project in the Bronx. He and another creature took her up to the roof, repeatedly raped and sodomized her, took the barrel of his own gun and put it in her anus, 35 stitches to close it. Do we even know her name? Maybe if Bernard Goetz had taken a little target practice, we would have spared that woman of that trauma and that...
The newspapers didn't write that. It wasn't exciting enough because it was a black man on a black woman crime. That didn't sell newspapers for them. So Mr. Goetz gets a year in jail because some pablum-puking judge wants to make sure that he gets his... I hope I don't come up before that guy someday, but if I do... Colonel Pagano.
Sir.
Goetz. I know you can't list him as a hero in your book, but do you understand the thinking that could have permeated that man's mind that would have forced him to do that?
I can understand that. I don't know that I would tolerate or condone it. I don't know that that I agree with everything I've heard here tonight outside of... I sit here and wonder and hope I do better than the last guy that sat in the seat. I'm not sure.
You will, sir. Your record has earned our respect.
I hope so. I've been thrown out of union meetings and things like that, but I haven't been thrown out of this place yet. You know, the truth of the matter is there is a frustration afoot. There is a length to which a man must go. But I think Congressman Torricelli has made some valid points, and there have been other valid points here today. In New Jersey, we don't believe we should take handguns or guns, period, away from people. I don't think that banning guns is ever going to be possible in total in this country. But in New Jersey, what we have done effectively is limit possession of weapons and exclude those people since 1968 who have criminal records, who are known drunkards in the community, who are drug addicts, or who are mental defectives. And the last, of course, is sometimes very difficult to weed out. But over the years, we have denied guns to 35,000 people who should not have guns. Have we reduced the crime record? I don't know whether you can claim a victory in that area, but in New Jersey, in the area of murder, atrocious assault, aggravated assault, or robbery.
How about rape?
Well, rape, really, you're in a different area, and I think that's something we've got to address a little bit differently. But in New Jersey, since we've had that kind of control, we have consistently had less activity in the use of guns and criminal involvement.
So that could be a two-pronged attack.
It's a two-pronged attack. There's no way that if a person is a legitimate person, that they should ever be denied a gun in their home or a gun in their shop. But, you know, it's awfully difficult to say, as has been said here this evening, that we're going to train everybody who wants to carry a gun, because it is a situation of opportunity. I'm not so sure that Bernard Goetz was absolutely wrong. He was legally wrong. The jury found him wrong, part wrong. But I don't know that we are going to be in better condition if we permit that opportunity in every tavern, to every citizen who wants to carry a gun.
But to every lawful citizen who wants to carry a gun, who can pass the muster, you wouldn't deny them the right to carry a gun.
I would be very skeptical about the right to carry a gun, but not the right to have, or no, not to own a gun. No, not at all.
Can I address that?
Go ahead, please.
In New York, if we use New York
Congressman,
only
anytime
as
you want
an
to jump in
example,
there, you guys do
as
it.
an example, because we recognize nationally that New York is perhaps one of the most difficult places in the country to obtain a carry permit. What sense does it make to have a premise permit which restricts the holder to keeping that gun on premise? Let me give you a scenario very quickly. You own a small little shop, a shoe repair shop. You're not making enough of money to qualify for a carry. The criteria is money. It's not life. So not to get into the whole subject of what are the criteria, but that's the law. So he can't get a carry permit, he gets a premise permit. The police department says you must keep that gun locked up in your shop. He can't take the gun with him for protection when he makes the bank deposit. He can't take it with him when he goes to buy his leather goods. He can't take the gun with him when he locks up the shop to go home. So what happens if there's a burglary?
So the little businessman gets penalized.
The little guy always gets hurt.
The guy making some
The
bucks.
little guy always gets hurt. What about the Trumps and the Rockefellers that carry guns? How did they get them?
Neither can you let...
Why is it we don't want people walking around with guns? Because that gets to the question, what is the Bernard Goetz case really about?
We're not
the fact
talking
that
about
civilization
people.
in our hands is slipping through our hands in this country.
That are trained.
You
Why doesn't the
cannot
government
have
train
people walking around the streets of America carrying guns.
How to protect themselves? Tell me. You spend millions of dollars. You spend millions of dollars on gun control administration and not in training.
So I can tell you to shut up for a second.
Let me hear the colonel here.
How are you going to train all these people?
We'll train them.
We're not going to train them.
Get out of here.
More NRA more people and more law enforcement agencies than any other agency, something like 200,000 people a year.
Is when people are told that they'll really get security out of carrying these guns. The fact is, you go into the subways of New York, the streets of New York with a handgun, pull it on a criminal, the chances are better he's going to take it out of your hands, blow your brains out before you get him.
Didn't happen to Bernie Goetz.
It didn't happen to Bernie Goetz.
It didn't
happen to Bernie Goetz, but the chances are pretty good. The statistics show it's more likely to happen to
But it sure as hell happened to Bernie the first time when he didn't have a gun.
How does a uniformed policeman go down the street and look at, and I have nothing at all wrong with the way folks here are dressed tonight, but nothing wrong with it. But how in the world does a policeman go down the road and every time he confronts a citizen say, is this a trained citizen? He's got a gun dangling out of his belt. I mean, where in the world, as the congressman says, wait a second, let me finish.
A police officer in uniform is, in fact, a real police officer.
Because,
that's ridiculous.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah? Tell that to the woman that I know that got raped because she opened the door for a uniformed officer. And I was a uniformed officer.
Let me tell you something, because
let's not take the power
colonel
away
may not
from the
say it,
people.
but let me say it to you.
The people have the power, and they belong...
You persist with the gun lobby, making it so that people are walking the streets carrying guns.
I didn't say that.
That there are no restrictions on who gets them.
I didn't say that either.
You're not going to get people like Colonel Pagano who want to be law enforcement officers anymore.
I want to know
because
what
it's getting too
redress a
dangerous.
person in
The
New
public
Jersey
needs
has
to back up the police.
Curtis.
The colonel, congressman here, they're good with their words, right? We have a real huckleberry politician ourselves in New York. Seems like he's auditioning for Ocasio-Foe when he has that commercial. You know, you get a year in jail, Mayor Koch says, if you get caught with an illegal handgun. The laws are there, gentlemen. They need to be enforced.
You came to New Jersey once, and you left quietly when we told you to depart that way.
You shot and killed one of our guardian angels, a Newark police officer. Is that the message you're giving us?
You're as full of
with no
baloney as a
weapons?
Christmas
We have to be
turkey,
more
Curtis.
worried in Newark, New Jersey, of the police than we do the criminals in the music.
All right, let's check it. Is gun control working on the streets? Is gun control working on the streets? That's next. Stay tuned. Okay. On the telephone now, we've got David Horowitz. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this story. He's the consumer watchdog for KNBC in Los Angeles. He had a horrifying personal experience with a plastic gun. Before we go to David, let's take a look and see what he went through. You got that on the film over there? On a monitor.
Pardon me? What is this? Let me see what it says. All right.
He's got a gun to his back.
All right, well, let me read this. Folks, we have someone on the set who's standing here and would like me to read this copy which was just handed to me. You want to tell me your name or not? What is it? And Gary, where are you from?
All right. Now, David, good evening and welcome to our program. How are you?
Well, good to be with you.
Nice to have you with us. Can we hear David a little louder in the studio, please?
All right, can you hear me now, Morton?
David, that's better. David,
All right, let me just
obviously
tell
you
you
never
something
thought
very
for a moment
interesting
that
that
gun wasn't
happened
real,
tonight,
did you?
Just before you went on the air, about 10 minutes to 9 your time, a guy came into a television station in Fresno with a toy gun, which turned out to be a toy gun later, held it on one of the news people, had him read a statement before he gave up, and they found out it was a toy gun, and they pulled the station off the air.
This is tonight.
This is tonight.
This is about half an hour ago this happened. Did you ever think that that plastic gun was a toy gun, David?
Hey, how can you tell? How can you tell, Morton, when someone's sticking what looks like a .45 caliber automatic in the back of your head and saying, you either read this or I'm going to shoot you? And it was so realistic looking. It was one of the Daisy BB guns that they pride on being an authentic replica of an Army 45. Are you going to say to the guy, hey, is that a toy or the real thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't ask that either. Only my laundromat would know whether I thought it was real. Yeah. David, what crime has this guy been charged with, all right? And do you feel it was an appropriate charge?
Right. Well, what they had to do was to find something to charge him with because there was no law on the books really to deal with this. So they charged him with false imprisonment. And get this one, Morton. They got him on grand larceny for stealing airtime.
David, hold on with us. The colonel wants to say something.
That was the problem in New Jersey before we had a gun law. When we had a situation like that, where we apprehended someone or wanted to apprehend someone, we didn't have the authority to take them and hold them. And that was one of the important points that came through when the new gun law came in place in 1968. It's an important thing for a policeman to have some authority to do something.
All right. But you know what I've been doing since this incident is fighting back to try to get some laws on the books that make some sense. And one of the laws that I've helped to draft in the state of California is a law that, first of all, makes it illegal to manufacture, to distribute, or to sell look-alike or replica weapons. And two, if you use one in the commission of a crime, or you use one to brandish, And to create fear on the part of an individual, it is a felony. If that law had been on the books, when this happened to me, they would have had something to charge this person with. And you know something? You feel the same thing in your guts, whether they're pointing a toy gun at you that you don't know is a toy gun or the real thing.
David, I'd go along with you as far as the second part of the law, that if a guy uses that weapon and brandishes it as a real gun, and you've got him on a felony. But I wouldn't try banning replica guns. I mean, don't you think that's carrying it a little too far?
No, it isn't, Morton, and I'll tell you why. We have had 3 cases so far in the state of California where police officers have shot young children who they thought had real guns, and they turned out to be replica or look-alike guns. One of them was a laser tag gun that a 15-year-old was playing with in the schoolyard late at night when a sheriff's deputy came along, thought they had broken into the schoolyard. The kids were playing laser tag, pointed the laser tag gun at him, and the sheriff's deputy blew him away. Another was a 9-year-old...
That seems to me that might be a policeman who wasn't trained very effectively.
Pardon me?
That seems that might be a policeman who wasn't trained very effectively.
Well, you want to know something, though, Morton? It's something that's not only happened in California, it's happened in other places across the United States, and it has nothing to do with the training of the police officer. I take the police officer's side, because if someone is standing in dim light and they're pointing what looks like an Uzi or a .45 caliber automatic or a .357 Magnum or some of these other authentic or replica or look-alike guns at you, what are you going to do? Are you going to wait and take the chance to see if it's a toy or not? Just the way I had this gun held at me. Am I going to say, is this guy holding a toy at me? Are you going to risk your life, or are you going to act?
No. As a matter of fact, if I'm a trained policeman, I'm going to know how to act a little bit better than shooting at a kid who's playing laser tag in a schoolyard. I think maybe you have some validity to your story, but I think the example you use is pretty poor.
Well, let me tell you something, Morton. I don't think the example is poor. And there are 3 kids who were killed this way, and there are 3 police officers who feel awful about having to do it, but when their life is on the line and you're making a split-second decision, if someone is pointing a weapon at you and you have a weapon and you're not sure it's the real thing because you can't tell the difference because it looks so real, you tell me what you're going to do.
Well, I'll tell you then, what you're doing is you're going to put a friend of mine out of business in Washington, D.C. He manufactures cigarette lighters that are guns, all right? So everyone who carries a cigarette lighter gets shot.
Not everyone, Morton, but a good number of them are getting a shot across this country.
And Morton, it's not hard to deal with. The Los Angeles City Council has a proposal with these replica guns. They put an orange stripe around the outside. They put something at the end that obviously makes it look fake. Now, some people are going to paint it or change it or file it down. You're not going to make a perfect law out of it. But the fact is we can do something so in these cases a police officer in many cases can see something and warn them and tell them this is a toy. And in that split-second decision, that'll save some lives. Not tough to deal with.
Let me ask Stephen Hyman to share the loudmouth with Curtis Lee, if you would, for just a second. Mr. Hyman is a lawyer and an officer of the Board of Directors for the New York ACLU. Thanks, Mr. Hyman, for being with us tonight.
I hope it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, no, it will be, believe me. All right, you folks have been very kind. You've shown up all the time, and even though I disagree with you 99% of the time, you're always here. Mr. Hyman, when we talk about the guy who was arrested in the Horowitz case, and thank you, David, for being with us, incidentally. I don't want to hold you up. Do you think that the guy was charged under the right statute?
Sure. The basic thing is that you cannot commit an assault, which is what generally we talk about, when you have a make-believe gun. I think it was fortunate for Mr. Horowitz that it was, in fact, a make-believe gun so that he could not actually get hurt. The fear is a different issue, and you can have statutes specifically drafted. You can't draft them after the fact to get the person who committed that crime. He now has set a new standard for a new criminal law, which will be perfectly valid and held up.
No, but I think something should be understood, all right? Yeah, and we're going to be right back in just a second, but I want to make a point here. I think something should be understood. Most of the police will attest to the fact, and the people in Washington, D.C. and at the Bureau will attest to the fact that if someone walks in with a gun, they are going to immediately use it on you. So if someone walks in with a gun, sticks it in your back and says, read a statement or do this or do that, if they haven't pulled the trigger, you've got a 75% chance that they're not going to pull the trigger, all right?
Well, but that's a standard I don't think the criminal law wants to take into account. What you want to do is deal with what the crime may be.
Do you think it's all right for people if they're licensed to carry guns? Honest, law-abiding citizens.
I do not favor the right of citizens to carry guns as a right. I think that there is a permissible right of regulation, and in fact can go as far as to prohibit handguns. Right. But that's not a constitutional issue, I should say, nor necessarily the position of the Civil Liberties Union. The Civil Liberties position is a simple one. The Constitution does not guarantee the right to carry firearms. What it says is that the government, the Congress, the Senate, or the state legislatures can regulate gun control and can have reasonable regulations with regard to it, or in fact prohibit it.
All right, we're going to come right back because I want to go to our studio audience. I want the loudmouths to pack up. I want you guys to make the decision. Stand by. Quickly now, we've explored a lot of the issues tonight. We've heard a lot of the comments from our expert guests. Let's hear from the real experts, the citizens of the United States. Ma'am.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am here as a guest of Mr. Stephan D'Andrelli of the Guardian Group International. I myself have recently applied for a gun permit. 1, personal protection. 2, personal protection of my property that I have worked very hard for all my life. 3, I think, and most importantly, is that I am dating a New York City police officer who has told me that he himself would not want to be without a gun, even if he was not on the force.
Bless you. How about you, young man?
All I want to say is that if I were to apply for a gun permit, I'd like to have one because I'd like to protect my wife, my child-to-be, and my family, and my friends, and my property. And just to add with what the young lady said, I think that if you are entitled and you're, what you would say, qualified to have a gun, you should be able to have one.
Sir.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. If the people themselves, the average Joe on the street, didn't have the right to own and bear arms, when the government went astray, there would be no way to stop it.
Nazi Germany found that out, didn't
Exactly,
they?
right.
First thing that Hitler did was confiscate the guns, sir.
I tell you, I have a lot of respect for these. I have a lot of respect for these congressmen. I think that they could come up with an effective way of licensing handguns so that sometime we can have make some order out of this chaos and not invade on our privacy and self-defense.
Sir.
I'd like to ask the lawyers and the congressmen something. I'm in college. I plan to be a lawyer. And you're right. The Second Amendment does it doesn't give people actually the right to carry guns. It gives the states to have the right to have a militia. But that grew out of English common law that government oppressed the people, and the right to bear arms was a bulwark against the government oppressing of the people. And I'd like to ask the congressman and the lawyer that the people have the right to own guns because the people in the United States,
we are people, the government.
Yeah, we are the sovereign power of the United States.
We'll be back in just a second. Stand by. Stand by. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of sitting home watching the same old boring television shows? Television is alive again at Channel 9. So be a part of our studio audience, if you dare. For tickets, call right now, 201-867-TIXX.
We've heard from our experts tonight, all right, and I think most of you have made your decision. Let me tell you one thing. Any of the law-abiding citizens at home or in our audience, and I think at home and in our audience, all of our viewers are law-abiding citizens. Mr. Andrelli says, any of you who can qualify for a gun permit, he'll do it free and give you the training. Get a hold of him. You can own your damn gun, all right? I want to thank the Colonel very kindly for being with us. Curtis, our attorney, Congressman, you're a good man, sir. Thank you for being with us. And I just want to tell you one thing, all right? I don't have, all right, a lot to say about this show tonight. Like hell I don't. I know that what I want is to have a permit to carry a gun. My wife is an expert, all right, with a gun. I want her to have a permit to carry a gun because I'd much rather be judged by a jury of 6 than carried to my damn grave by 6 pallbearers. Good night, George Grace.